Coming up on KPBS Evening Edition, the Occupy movement turned 6 months old this month. A happy birthday or post-mortem.
And a group of San Diego political movers and shakers are tired of all the political fighting and are trying to change the tone of the conversation. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Joanne Farian.
And I'm Peggy Pico, in for Dwayne Brown.
Hundreds of people are gathered in Kearny Mesa at this hour to protest a proposed rate increase by San Diego Gas and Electric. The company wants to charge customers for its uninsured costs from the 2007 wildfires. The total increase could average out to anywhere from $350 to $700 per meter. KPBS reporter Amitha Sharma attended a public hearing earlier today. Amitha, what happened?
Well, Joanne, customer after customer stood up at the Albar Shriners Memorial Auditorium today to blast SDGE for what they called an outrageous request.
Is management at SDGE reaching in their pockets to pull out money to cover this cost? I don't think so, not what I've heard from the previous speakers. Don't hold us prisoners to SDGE's lack of foresight and stupidity.
And a reminder, a state inquiry found that SDGE lines ignited the 2007 fires because the company did not properly design, build, and maintain its equipment. Hundreds of people whose homes were burned down in 2007 have sued SDGE, and it's those uninsured costs of settling the lawsuits that the company wants to pass along to customers. SDGE spokeswoman Stephanie Donovan says the company has the right to do that because if damage is caused during the operation of a service that everyone benefits from, then she says everyone must bear those costs instead of shareholders.
We are a regulated utility, and we are allowed a regulated rate of return that we have the opportunity to earn. There's no guarantees.
Meanwhile, ratepayer advocates have challenged the credibility of SDG&E's regulators, in this case, the California Public Utilities Commission. They singled out Commissioner Timothy Allen Simon, who received $50,000 in gifts, meals, and trips from trade groups supported by industries he regulates.
This is the kind of thing that really brings into question how much access they have, and the utilities appear to have unfettered access.
And Joanne, there's a second public hearing going on right now as we speak. Afterwards, it will be up to regulators to approve or reject the rate increase for SDG&E.
KPBS reporter Amitha Sharma.
A Camp Pendleton Marine is waiting to learn whether he'll be booted out of the Corps for his Facebook page. Sergeant Gary Stein got in trouble for a post where he criticized President Obama and said he would not follow the president's orders. The Corps is now holding a dismissal hearing to decide if his future in the military will continue. Military prosecutors say Stein also posted images of the president's face superimposed on a jackass and that the Marine sold no Obama stickers online. In defense, Stein says it's a matter of a freedom of speech.
A clerical error led to the accidental release of search warrants connected to the beating death of an Iraqi woman last month. Those documents were supposed to be sealed but were obtained by UT San Diego. The warrants say the victim, Shaima Alawadi, was planning to divorce her husband and move to Texas, and that her daughter was distraught over an upcoming arranged marriage. Alawadi's daughter said there was a note telling the family to go back to Iraq, and that report sparked talk of a hate crime. The police documents don't say what was in the note. They do say it was a copy and not an original. Alawadi's husband and daughter are now in Iraq for her funeral.
A San Diego group has followed up on its record-setting viral video. The new video is called Kony 2012 Part 2. Beyond Famous. It's more of a traditional documentary than the original video, focusing on the private army of Ugandan warlord Joseph Kony. The sequel also addresses criticism of its San Diego-based group Invisible Children. Absent from the new video is group co-founder Jason Russell. It was only last September when they were dominating the news. Now Occupy movement is barely a footnote in the media on most days. Joanne speaks with one of San Diego's first occupiers at the Evening Edition Roundtable.
It's been 6 months since the Occupy movement began in New York City. What started as a protest against Wall Street quickly became an international phenomenon, contributing terms like the 1%, 99%ers, and the word Occupy itself to the cultural lexicon. Joining me to talk about where the movement stands now and where it's going are Occupy San Diego member David Abramson and SDSU political science professor Jonathan Grobart. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
David, let's begin with you. How did you get involved with the Occupy movement?
I got involved getting started by watching the initial occupations in Zuccotti Park and in Sacramento. And really, I've never been an activist my entire life. This is the first time I've ever, protested or been involved in something like this. And really, what drew me to it is this is the very first worldwide movement of people, standing up together across all different communities, all different backgrounds, all different ages, and coming together for a common cause and to create solutions for our problems.
And did you actually sleep in the concourse downtown?
I did.
For how many days?
Not too many days. I had a full-time job as well, but I've been down there pretty much every day since the beginning.
Now, I want to show the people at home some video of the height of this movement in San Diego when everybody was talking about. And so what you're about to see really are a number of people getting arrested for sleeping downtown, violating an ordinance. Now, Professor Grobart, I want to toss it over to you. Now, coming from images like the ones we're seeing now when everyone was paying attention to now, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find occupiers actually occupying a place in San Diego. Has this just sort of lost steam?
No, I don't think the Occupy movement has lost steam. I think what's most impressive is they now have infrastructure, both in San Diego and across the country. So now it has changed the discourse, as you've mentioned, but now it's one frame of reference for organizing protests and organizing a strategy that's an alternative to electoral politics in San Diego and across the country. So I think it's at a very interesting next phase.
So we're in an election year right now. Mm-hmm. And do you see how it's infiltrated perhaps the campaign, the political campaign as well?
It's infiltrated it in a shallow manner, which is not surprising because electoral politics is still pretty unappealing. I think the Democratic Party is trying to co-opt some elements of it, and the Republican Party is just trying to insult it whenever it can. So I think the Occupy movement needs to probably stay away from electoral politics and keep rooted in its independent alternative framework.
It was also criticized for sort of not having a leader, and perhaps that's why it maybe couldn't go further than what some people claim it, that it hasn't gone far enough. Do you think that's the case, that it needs a strong leader? I'll throw this out to you first of all, David.
Actually, I was very skeptical of the idea of a movement without leaders or any organization without leaders in the beginning, but what the 6 months at Occupy San Diego has taught me is that through consensus and through working together where everyone has a voice, we come up with better decisions than if we had a leader telling us this is what we should do. And it's really shown in all of our actions and our initiatives that we've gotten accomplished. And actually, it's really changed me to believe that, a decentralized structure. And it's not that we don't have leaders, it's that everyone is a leader, and we step up and we step back at different times. So I think there's a little bit of a misconception there.
So what have you accomplished then? You mentioned some, your accomplishments. What has the movement here in San Diego actually achieved?
So we had a National Bank Transfer Day where this is a nationwide action where 250,000 to 800,000 people took their money out of banks and joined credit unions. We got a union back into the ports through our port shutdown efforts. We've contributed to shutting down the SOPA and PIPA internet bills. Really what we've done is we've changed the collective consciousness of people, and we've really occupied the hearts and minds of people to kind of the injustices that are happening right now and the possibility that there is an alternative.
Now, David, early on when I asked you how you got involved with this, you spoke to the idea that this was a sort of this large movement being part of something bigger. But was there something in that message other than just the method of being part of a large movement? Was there something that spoke to you?
Yeah, there really was, and it's still kind of like intangible, but really why I'm there is I want to see a better world for me and for my children when I have children and for everyone around me, to create something new and to create something democratic and to create something that will create community and art and culture and sustainability. And I feel like we're all firing on the same cylinders, from all these wide perspectives, and we're getting things done.
Professor, is that just sort of, is this really a youth movement that has caught on, that has captured the minds of young people to finally feel like they're part of something more?
In part, it's a movement that's captured the youth movement, but I think it's something that's spread beyond that. I want to say something about the leaders. If you think about the civil rights movement and the African-American protests, I read about this over Martin Luther King Jr. He had a very imperious chief of staff, and he was rallying all these people to say, get behind the leader. And then this young man who later became one of the co-founders of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, he went up to that reverend, the chief of staff, and said, Reverend, you say, follow the leader. Why not have lots of leaders? And I think that gets to the Occupy movement, and it goes beyond young people. I'm not particularly young anymore, and it speaks to me.
Okay, Professor Grobart and David Abramson, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can civil discourse become civil once again? Some San Diegans are trying to turn the tide on attack ads. We'll have a look at that in just a few minutes. But first, returning veterans face higher unemployment rates than their civilian peers. We'll take a look at a university program to help vets become engineers. This is KPBS Evening Edition.
Tonight on KPBS at 8, visit a San Diego backcountry store that hasn't changed in a century and hear about the once mighty silk industry of North County on Ken Kramer's About San Diego. Then at 8:30, visit the famous Baja Studios where they filmed the movie Titanic and enjoy a Puerto Nuevo lobster feast on Crossing South. And at 9, sleepless nights are taking their toll on Martin and Louisa, and tempers flare on an all-new Doc Martin. That's tonight on KPBS.
The fabric of democracy, I think, really has worn very thin.
The opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice.
Americans have to fight for the American dream.
Democracy is not what governments do, it's what people do.
This is how we fight back.
Moyers and Company.
I'm Bill Moyers. Join me Friday nights at 10 on KPBS San Diego.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
The transition from the strict regimen of military life to civilian education or a career track is a daunting challenge for many veterans. KPBS education reporter Kyla Calvert tells us San Diego State University is building on its reputation as a veteran-friendly campus with a program that tries to smooth the road from the military to civilian work.
Sean Hansen may not immediately stand out from the other students in his engineering classes at San Diego State University, but he has experience that sets him apart.
Well, I was in the Marine Corps for 7 years. I was a diesel mechanic fixing Humvees and 5 tons and mostly troop-moving vehicles. I was in for 7 years, and I had several deployments, one to Okinawa, Japan, 6 months in Iraq.
But experiences like Hansen's don't necessarily translate easily into a civilian career path. Unemployment rates for the country's youngest veterans outpace those for their civilian peers. Closing that gap was one of the reasons the National Science Foundation funded SDSU's pilot Troops to Engineers service program. Patricia Riley, a former Navy commander, heads the program.
There's a good body of research that says if you can get a student into an internship, it enhances their ability to get a follow-on job in their chosen career field.
Riley says San Diego is the perfect place to put that research to the test.
We're at ground zero for veterans leaving the military. We have more veterans, we have more active duty leaving the military in San Diego than any other city in the country. And the need that it's meeting is what I remember, and I joined the Navy at the end of Vietnam, what I remember of veterans at the University of Minnesota, there was no place for them.
Riley came to SDSU knowing she would network to find internships for veterans. She's placed 33 since she started 14 months ago. She says what she didn't know was that her office would turn into a kind of clubhouse. Her students stop by to talk about a worrisome test, vent their frustrations, or get help rewriting resumes so their military accomplishments make sense to civilian employers. She says she sometimes thinks of herself as Commander Mom, and she's proud to say that all of her students who have completed their internships have been asked by the companies to stay on. One of those businesses is KevCon, a general contracting company in Escondido. Hansen works in KevCon's estimating department, where he deals with contractors and figures out how much projects will cost.
Just by being able to see drawings of buildings and know the process and know where work is actually acquired from. So being familiar with the process and seeing how that works has been a really good asset for me to learn.
KevCon founder Kevin Kutina says his own experience leaving the Marines made him eager to help other veterans make it in their civilian careers.
I know when I got out of school and did my time in the Marine Corps and got out, I had a very difficult time finding work because a lot of people said, you're in the Marine Corps, so you didn't learn something applicable, or you were too far out of college, so what you learned in college wasn't applicable anymore.
Hansen's military service isn't his only distinction from his younger classmates. He's a father, and Kutina says that makes placing veterans in flexible, paid internships even more important.
A lot of them that go through that system are married, have kids. So it's also a little bit more difficult on them, too, that they've left the military with some good paying jobs, steady income, and now they're going to school a little bit struggling, and now they got to find a workplace that's flexible for them.
Hansen says the support he's gotten from Riley and Kutina makes the sometimes stressful mix of family, work, and school easier to cope with.
I know I can always go back to a fellow veteran and get help, and that's nice to have that support structure. Just like in the military, you always had somebody you could go to get assistance with one of your problems. So to be able to know that that's there, if something does arise, then it's comfortable. It's a good feeling to know that somebody has your back.
That was Kyla Calvert reporting. By the semester's end, SDSU hopes to bring the number of veterans getting the kind of experience and support that Hansen has to 50. Next at the roundtable, a conversation about civil conversation. Joanne speaks with a political scientist about out-of-control political rhetoric.
A group of San Diegans is calling for the return of civil discourse to politics. Political movers and shakers are gathering Monday to host the first annual community conference on restoring civility to civic dialogue. Many analysts are predicting this to be a record year for negative attack ads. Can the tide be turned? I'll speak with political scientist and conference moderator Carl Luna in just a moment. But first, here's a clip of two GOP candidates attacking each other over attack ads.
But this ain't a beanbag. We're going to come into a campaign. We're going to describe the differences between us. But I do think the rhetoric, Mr. Speaker, I think was a little over the top.
You think my rhetoric was over the top, but your ads were totally reasonable. That's what I understand. I've taken the governor's advice.
Mr. Speaker, the super PACs that are out there running ads, with Ron Paul's, mine, yours. As you know, that is not my ad. I don't write that ad. I can't tell them not to.
Well, how about this? Would you both agree to take these super PAC ads down?
But, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't call some of the things you've called me public. I think that's just over the top.
Joining me to talk about San Diego's conference on the return to civil dialogue is event moderator and political scientist Carl Luna. Carl, thanks for coming back to the show.
Nice to be here.
So is this what we're talking about, what we just saw?
Yeah, we've gone from Lincoln Douglas to Romney Gingrich, and it hasn't been a pleasant journey.
So, as mentioned in this video clip, and I think what a lot of analysts have said, that is it because of these super PACs where you have endless amounts of money and candidates can have some deniability?
The super PACs are definitely making the problem worse. They're exacerbating it because now candidates can say, I didn't do this. The Godfather didn't put the head in the producer's bed. His henchmen did. Most of the people who run the super PACs work for the candidates. But we've been on a trajectory toward negativity for about 20, 25 years. 1980, when Ronald Reagan ran for president, he didn't run one negative ad. The candidates today, 50 to 75% negative. Negative is easier to sell than positive.
So was there a turning point in terms of when ads became negative?
In the 90s, you started to see the move in that direction as a lot of social divide developed in America. The modern media with AM talk radio, with cable news networks, have created an echo chamber where people are used to hearing their point of view, and they like negative stuff said about the other guy, or they get turned off by the process and they don't show up to vote.
Let's turn to local politics now. Race for mayor, it's a pretty heated race. Have we crossed a line in that race?
So far, the candidates are staying relatively civil in the campaign. There have been negative statements made about each other. Nathan Fletcher became an independent. He was attacked by both the left and the right of the candidates on his flip-flop, etc., personal attack. I think as you get closer to the June primary, you might see a tendency toward negativity going up, and in the fall election, that could be an issue. And we'd like San Diegans to say, look, all of our candidates want a better city. Let's debate the issues about what will make us a better city and stay away from the personal attacks. They don't help the dialogue.
You mentioned Nathan Fletcher. The act itself, him leaving the party and becoming an independent, do you think that was a manifestation of exactly what we're talking about?
According to his campaign, that was the issue. Now, some pundits are saying there was a political triangulation. It's probably a little bit of each. But bottom line, Republican and Democrat as a brand have lost a lot of their luster because their elected officials simply can't get together, be it locally or nationally, and reach the compromise a lot of people in America and San Diego know we need to have.
Now, you mentioned this is what people want. They want civility back into the discussion. But when you look at these talk shows that you mentioned, and you look at ratings, and you look at numbers, or even the clip that we showed, I mean, things that get all of the hits on YouTube, it's the fireworks. It is exactly what we're saying people don't want. But if they're watching it and they're listening to it, what does that say?
Well, they're actually not. If you go back to the 1950s, 60s, 70s, we all watched the same network shows, and we'd all hear the message, and if it was negative, it didn't work well. But now you've got a Rush Limbaugh show. A couple million people see it. You've got a YouTube hit. 90,000 or a million people see it. This isn't like the days when 40, 50, 60 million people would watch the same thing, and you got a real idea of what Americans were interested in. What we have is niche. People play to the niche. In these primary elections, a small number of people turn out to vote, and you're dealing toward the lowest common denominator to get those votes. You're not generating the broad, popular message like a Ronald Reagan, like a John Kennedy would have, to aspire us to our better angels.
So tell me a little more about Monday, what your aim is.
Well, this event grew out of a process developed by the Catfish Club and the Reverend George Walker Smith, who's been an icon in the San Diego community for many years. The goal of this process that's come out of the original meeting last fall was to bring as many San Diegan community leaders, politicians, candidates for office together in one place. USD, we're going to do it on Monday. We're going to have a panel discussion for about an hour talking about what civility is, things like we're talking about here, but then get the group together to talk about what are some basic rules we can aspire to? Things we used to think we learned in kindergarten, how you should behave toward others. How can we start adapting that in our day-to-day discourse, in our newspapers, in the media, in our political events?
Quickly, Carl, where can people find out more? Is there a website?
Go to University of San Diego's website, sandiego.edu/civility.
Great. Carl Luna, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
It's opening day at Petco Park. We'll have a look at some of the pregame fun in just a moment. This is KPBS Evening Edition.
I'm Gwen Eiffel on the next News Hour, how the presidential campaigns are using the virtual bulletin board Pinterest to reach voters. That's Thursday on the PBS News Hour.
They're symbols of the British monarchy. Grand buildings that have stood for centuries. Host Fiona Bruce tours the greatest royal places in England, uncovering incredible stories along the way. Secret passageways under Windsor Castle, the bombing of Buckingham Palace, why Queen Victoria relocated this grand marble arch. It's an amazing journey through the Queen's Palaces.
Tour the Queen's Palaces, Monday at 10 on KPBS.
The American people have named PBS the most trusted source of news
and public affairs
for the 8th year
in a row.
Trust.
The American people have spoken.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Public Square on KPBS Evening Edition. As you heard earlier, public hearings into SDGE's request for a rate hike are underway. The utility wants the increase to pay for uninsured costs from the 2007 wildfires. Many of you have been commenting on this issue on Facebook. Merritt Zabelinski had this to say about SDGE. Electric chair. Stephen Greenwald says Sempra Corporation is a private entity with extremely highly paid executives who have failed in not having enough catastrophic insurance, and they should be held accountable for their reckless behavior. Joshua Tutel asks the following: good excuse to conserve power? And Emmett Fox is less optimistic. Why bother with any of this BS? They will make San Diego pay, and that's the end of that. No use stressing over a bunch of criminals and crooked government. Well, you can join this conversation by following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, and of course, you can always send me an email directly, jfarian@kpbs.org.
It's a day when optimism abounds, a day when nearly everyone wears a smile along with their Padres cap, a day to possibly play hooky or have a hot dog and Cracker Jacks. You know it as opening day, with all the hoopla and magic that comes from welcoming back baseball. We went to East Village today, where thousands of Padres fans arrived early to tailgate and revel in the anticipation. Here's what some had to say.
Season ticket holders, and we've been looking for this day all year long, and so we started planning our tailgate about a week ago. Thought that we had to get down here early and, you know, take the day off work and all that.
It's the one sport where I think that that opening day is full of excitement. You know, there's the newness of the season, all teams are in it, nobody's in last place, and you get to see the new players coming in, players that have changed teams. It's fantastic.
Barbecue, drink some beers, have some sodas. We got plenty of water. We take food in, some water's in with us, and we don't drink inside the stadium. We have, you know, a few beers out here, and that's as far as it goes.
We're here every year, and we party from 9 o'clock till whenever they kick us out, so great time.
It's always a good environment, good atmosphere, happy people out here just wanting to watch some baseball. It's cool, you know, it's a little community and gets people involved, and we come out here to just share laughs and have fun.
The motto today, play ball. You can watch and comment on any of the stories you saw tonight on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us, and have a great evening.